I don't think that the Bank of England will cut rates.
Okay.
In this country. I think
I'm putting that on record, young man.
On record, I don't think that they will cut rates. I think that they recognise that there is this situation with savers and a lot of people in this country who've been very unhappy about 6 years of 0.5% rates. I don't necessarily think that cutting rates in this country would actually make a huge difference. So I don't think that they will cut rates in this country. What I do think will happen is that we're going to see a continuation of this scenario where we keep sort of putting off raising rates and putting off raising rates. We've had 6 years of a 0.5% base rate now, and you wouldn't have forecast that 6 years ago.
Okay, well, we've got 4 slides, and I'm very conscious of time here. This is inflation. This is a fantastic chart, isn't it?
Well,
or is it?
That's hot off the press this morning. That's hot off the ONS press this morning, the latest inflation chart. That shows CPI inflation down to 0.3% this morning. And what they said in that ONS report is that's food, transport and alcohol and tobacco that's pulling that down. I mean, it's an incredible drop in inflation if you look, towards that peak of 5%, just 2011. But I would guess what you really need to look more at is the sort of 2013, 2012 level where it's just sitting, below 3%. And if you look at that chart, it's astonishing actually how long for that period that goes back 10 years to January 2005, that inflation has been above the Bank of England's 2% target. That's that 2% target level there. And for the vast majority of that time, it's been above it. It's now below it. How long it can stay, it's difficult to say. But if you look at the next chart that we've got.
Okay, so let's move on to the next slide.
That's from the inflation report last week. That's what the Bank of England thinks is going to happen to inflation. It shows the thick red banding in the middle of it, shows that the Bank of England thinks that inflation is going to fall down below 0%, so we're going to see a small period of deflation, and then it's going to pick back up, and they reckon in 2 years' time we'll be round about that target.
About 2%.
But what that says is that that effect that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years, where people have had this, constant inflation chipping away at the same time as their incomes have been stagnant, is hopefully going to be reversed. And over the next 2 years, they're going to have it a bit better. I mean, Mark Carney said that he thought this was unambiguously good for the consumer. And he delivered his sort of "you've never had it so good" message.
Right.
He's like, enjoy it while it lasts, basically. Enjoy it while it lasts, yeah.
Okay,
to be true.
Yeah.
let's move on to the next slide. So what is this telling us?
Right, what that is the it's the data pulled from the Bank of England inflation report, where they use the overnight index swaps curve, what the money markets say is going to happen to interest rates.
Yep.
And that shows on the, we've got the red line, which is the November report, what it looked like in November. The green line is the February report. And basically what that shows is the point where you get to a rate rise has been pushed out now to about spring 2016. And Mark Carney said that basically, barring any surprises, the Bank of England thinks that it will move interest rates along that level and that they should be rising spring 2016. Now, the caveat is that economists have come back from that and said, well, if he's right, and if this is unambiguously good for the consumer and it delivers the effect that the Bank of England is suggesting, don't bank on that rate rise not coming until spring 2016. There's a lot of them saying it could come the end of this year.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what happens in the US as well, obviously. When they decide to raise rates, then we'll follow suit.
Yeah, and the next slide, actually, if we move on to
the next slide.
Is what this is some figures, a map from RBS today, and it shows growth across the UK in 2014 and also in the last quarter of 2014, the 3 months running up to Christmas. Now, actually interesting, what that shows is growth spread quite evenly around the country. It shows it's not just London. London's up by more than anything else, but the two second biggest rises are the East Midlands and the North West, and Scotland's doing quite well as well. And what that says is if this is unambiguously good for the consumers, if this does help things pick up, if we do see wages increase at the same time as costs fall, don't forget it's not just for individuals, it's for businesses as well, then it could be good news. So actually, if we look at, potentially a rate rise coming sooner rather than later, maybe we should treat that as good news. Maybe for once we should treat good news as good news rather than the scenario we've had for the last 6 years of good news is bad news and bad news is good news because it keeps rates on the floor.